Hello and welcome to the Raw podcast. My name's James Copley from the Sunderland Echo. Today I'm very pleased to be joined by a guest from Plymouth Live, Chris Errington. Chris, I just asked how you're doing before we hopped on the show, and it's pretty badly in terms of a Plymouth Argyle perspective at the moment.
Well, we're recording this, James, on the morning after Argyle's 5-0 humiliation by Burnley at Home Park on Wednesday night. Burnley are an excellent side. Everyone knows that, and have got a very good chance of going up. But as everyone knows, there's ways of losing games, and that was certainly not a way to lose a game with all 5 of Burnley's goals coming before half-time. So, yeah, it wasn't a great Wednesday night. And, of course, as you will well appreciate, James, you have to get home in the evening and then write up all about it. And
Yes.
and you know, we're very fortunate to have the job where we can report on football teams. I'm very privileged to report on Plymouth Argyle. It's great when things are going well. It's not a great deal of fun when they're not. And but that's the rough and the smooth, isn't it? As football fans, we all know about the highs and lows. And unfortunately, in lots of cases, there's probably more lows than highs.
Yeah, we'll come on to the game and we'll preview the Sunderland game as well, Chris. But I think I read on your social media that you're into your 28th season covering Plymouth. Are you a Plymouth fan originally as well?
No, I'm from Kent originally, and ended up down in the far southwest of England. But yes, I'm in my 28th season, and you can't help but not have an affinity for the club. Of course, you can't. You know the club is really well, but yeah, so it's tough. But I mean, I don't need to tell Sunderland fans this, do I? That following a team, following your team can be challenging at times, can't it? And that's what the Argyle Green Army are going through at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be extremely challenging. I'm thinking of Sunderland's last relegation from the Championship. They were really, really poor that season, and it just felt like blow after blow after blow. It sort of feels that way for Plymouth at the moment, doesn't it? Obviously, the change of manager again. But talk us through that Burnley game, because we played them 2 games ago at Turf Moor, and sort of the criticism of Burnley is that they don't score as many goals, maybe, but they've got to Plymouth away from home. And I had in the back of my mind that perhaps Plymouth could spring a surprise, but that didn't materialise. What was the sort of the undoing of Plymouth in that first half? Because it was a blitz, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. There's a lack of confidence within the Argyle team. They've had a series of body blows, lots and lots of injuries this season. But every team gets injuries. I would agree with that. They've had to change manager. Morgan Whittaker, their star player, didn't play last night, and once Burnley took the lead in the 11th minute, there was only one outcome. I mean, Burnley don't concede goals, do they? So once they were 1-0 up after 11 minutes, it was how many are they likely to get? And they were 5 up at half time. And then the second half, as is often the way in these sort of situations, was a virtual non-event, really. Argyle showed a bit more fight. The new manager, who we can talk about, made 3 changes at half-time. There was a little bit more about them. But, let's not kid ourselves. Burnley were not going flat out in the second half. They had other games to look forward to. I think they've got Leeds coming up next, if I heard rightly from Scott Parker in the post-match press conference. So I'm sure their attention's turned to that. And Argyle, having played on a Wednesday night, have now got the mammoth trek up to the northeast to look forward to.
And what was the atmosphere like, if you don't mind me asking, at Home Park during that Burnley game? I asked this because when Sunderland came down there earlier in the season, I was really struck by sort of how intense the atmosphere was. And I actually think that got to Sunderland's players. But I'm just curious as to how Plymouth fans responded to going 5 down in the first half. I know there's a new manager. I know there have been struggles and injury issues, but what was that like? Yeah,
no, I mean, I've not often seen the Green Army turn on the players, but they did last night with cries of "this is embarrassing." And at the end of the game, a lot of the fans had already left, but quite a few of those that remained, made it abundantly clear they were not happy. And you can't blame him. You know, no team should be losing 5-0 at home to a team in the same division as them. That just shouldn't happen. You know, yes, Burnley are a ex-Premier League club. Yes, they may well end up back in the Premier League next season. Yes, Argyle have had injuries and all sorts of things have conspired against them this season. But you still should not be going down like that. 5-0 at half-time is, speaks for itself, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And obviously those who've followed the game last night as well will know that your job has been twofold. So you've had to cover Argyle being 5-0 down at half-time, bottom of the league, you know, losing against a very good Burnley side. But you've also had to deal with the sideshow transfer story surrounding Morgan Whittaker. I mean, the stuff I've read this morning is extraordinary. Can you fill us in on what happened, essentially?
Well, Morgan Whittaker's been an excellent player for Argyle. One of the reasons why they have done so well in the Championship until relatively recently. Naturally, he's been a target of transfer interest, not just in this transfer window, but in previous ones. Burnley and Middlesbrough are widely thought to have made bids for him in the current window. Now, he was not in the squad last night, although he was sat in the grandstand. The head coach, Miran Muzlic, was asked about this after the game and said that Morgan Whittaker had been selected in the team for the game, but he had not showed up, as in not arrived in time, and therefore wasn't involved in the squad. And, you know, I wonder how you would feel about that as a player in the dressing room. That cannot be good for morale. That could well have played a factor in the performance that we saw from Argyle in the first half. Is it an excuse? You know, you could probably argue it either way, but it's far from ideal preparation when you have a situation like that appear. And I think Miran Muzlic's comments after the game and how strong he was about it would indicate that whether Morgan Whittaker leaves Argyle before Saturday's game against Sunderland, there's no way he's going to be in the squad. I can't see there's any way that, even if there's a transfer not agreed before then, that he'll be part of the squad.
I mean, it's an extraordinary story. In your 28 seasons, have you ever witnessed anything like that? Because I must admit, when I read it this morning, I just thought that's up there with some of the strangest things I've seen, particularly from a manager post-match as well, where he's, you know, for want of a better phrase, quite clearly just hung him out to dry because he's seemingly in the wrong. I'm sure Morgan Whittaker would have his own side of things if he was to be interviewed at some point in the future. But I just thought it was crazy, a crazy story.
Yeah, as you well know, James, there's always two sides to every story, and obviously we've not heard from Morgan Whittaker about
sometimes a third and a fourth side as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you have to take these things on face value, and Miran Muzlic has given his and Argyle's side of things. So we'll see what happens from that. It's up there with one of the strangest things that I've seen in my time reporting. But we see some pretty strange things when you report on a football club. And, you know, it's not uncommon to be sometimes lost for words and think, did he really just say what I thought he said? And that was definitely one of those occasions. And as you say, coming off the back of a 5-0 defeat as well, you know, it just all, conspired to make it a really miserable evening for Argyle.
I felt like that actually when Mark Robbins came to the stadium with Stoke City in the FA Cup, and I don't know if you saw it, but he had a sort of little mini rant about the state of the FA Cup and there being no fans in the stadium. And I had to listen to the tape back because I thought, did he say what I think he saw? He's quite soft spoken, Mark Robbins, but I thought I don't want to get any of this wrong. I think I'm definitely going to have to double check this. But I mean, please, what's the fan reaction been like, Chris, to Morgan Whittaker's non-appearance?
Yeah, I think it's predictable, isn't it, that a lot of fans are unhappy about the reasons that have been given by Miran Muzlic for the fact he's not in the squad. it's a shame it seems to be ending this way, because Morgan has given Argyle some fantastic moments. He scored some brilliant goals, some match-winning goals. It's only a couple of weeks ago that he scored the winning goal when they went to Brentford in the FA Cup and won 1-0, and they've set themselves up for a fourth round home tie against Liverpool in a couple of weeks' time at Home Park. So, yeah, I think it's just sad. It's sad that this is the state that it's got to. And I'm sure all Argyle fans wish it hadn't worked out this way. But that's the reality of the situation we seem to be in now. And the club have got to deal with the situation, which presumably means agreeing a transfer for Morgan Whittaker to whoever it is, as soon as possible, really. And then they can put that sort of chapter to bed and focus on trying to make a fight of the rest of the season. It's going to be incredibly difficult for them to stay up. But I think all fans want to see their team show a bit of fight. Relegation might well happen, but the team need to fight.
I mean, even if that transfer goes through this afternoon, we're speaking on Thursday, Chris, you would suspect it'll be tough for Plymouth to get in the targets they want before the end of the window, wouldn't you, given the league position as well?
Yeah, not easy. Far from ideal timing. But again, that's the reality of the situation. You can't. There's no point crying about it if you're at the club. This is a situation. You've got to make the best of it. The fee is a bit anyone's guess, really, at the moment. It will be a substantial amount by Argyle standards, although Swansea City, his former club, I think gets a fair sell on as well. But they're going to have some money to spend. And regardless of what happens over the rest of this season, it's clear already that there's going to be a major overhaul of the squad, whether they stay up in the Championship or whether they are in League One next season.
And talk to us about the new manager as well. How's he done so far from an outside perspective? It doesn't appear to have been too much of a new manager bounce, but he's probably working amongst some constraints as well. Obviously, there's a lot gone on at the club before. He comes highly rated, doesn't he? Because he was a coach actually that was linked with Sunderland in the summer. He's got a good profile, but obviously a very hard job as well.
Yeah, he's taken on a really tough task. He had a fair bit of success at Cercle Bruges in the Belgian Premier League. He took them from quite low down in the league and got them qualified for Europe. They've been playing in the Europa Conference League and doing quite well. So he sort of comes with the identikit that Argyle like of a young, ambitious coach who they feel can take the club forward. It was a decision that some fans were not convinced about at all. The former Argyle manager, Stephen Schumacher, was in the running for the vacancy. And I think a lot of people thought in tricky circumstances he might be a safe pair of hands, although the way he left Argyle in December 2023 to go to Stoke City was, again, not handled particularly brilliantly. And there might have been some pushback against him returning. So anyway, they went with Miran Meslic. He's got such a hard task on his hand. There's injuries. Morgan Whittaker looks as though he's on the way out the door. Signing players in January, whenever you're near or at the bottom of the table, is never an easy task, is it? Because players are understandably a bit reluctant to put themselves forward for a relegation fight. It's a very difficult task for him. He speaks excellent English. He is very personable, charismatic. So as a person, he seems a really good guy. Obviously, 3 games in, and in the circumstances that Argyle are in, it's difficult to judge him so far as a head coach, as a manager, as a leader. Some of the viewers here, James, might have seen a video of his first day at Argyle, which went viral.
I was going to ask about that,
where he made a very good sort of first day speech to the players. Now, clearly, 1 point from 3 games since he made that speech, but it came across very well. The fans liked it, and so he's a personality. Hopefully, he's a strong leader, and he can make the decisions that need to be made to try and get Argyle. One, to stop Argyle from falling further and further, and then stabilise, and then hopefully in time, build things back up again.
And from the Plymouth board's perspective, Chris, it feels like the appointment of the new man had a bit of the Danny Rose about it. Is that a fair assessment in terms of the type of manager, the profile, and the job he's got really as well? Yeah,
lots of championship clubs have tried this route, haven't they? Manager from Europe isn't particularly well known, but has had some success. It seems to have been a common theme, doesn't it? Look down the list of. It always used to be, didn't it, James? That a few years ago, you looked down the Premier League and you couldn't find an English manager among the clubs there. It seems to be you can look down the Championship now, and there's not many, is there? A lot of head coaches, managers, call them what you will, have come from Europe. It seems to be the modern thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know he's very new into his tenure, but what are the key differences between him and Wayne Rooney, perhaps personality-wise and style of play as well, if there has been any sort of subtle little tweaks? I know Plymouth haven't done too well, but what is he trying to do at Plymouth?
One of the difficulties that he's had, James, is he's had 3 home games in 9 days, and he said himself before the Burnley game that he'd had probably more games than training sessions. And so it's extremely difficult to implement ideas when you've got this tighter schedule as it is, because obviously you play one game, then the following day is recovery, and then the following day is your prep day, and then you're playing, and then they played last night, recovery today, travel to Sunderland tomorrow. You've got very little chance to really implement your ideas. So I think what the differences are going to be is a little bit hard to say. He said on a couple of occasions his style of football is to be try and play the game as much in the attacking third as is possible. That doesn't necessarily mean you just get the ball forward, long ball style sort of thing. He wants them to be progressive. He wants them to play with intensity. He wants them to win the ball back high up the pitch. That is all going to take time to work on implement, and he's taken over from Wayne Rooney, who I have to say was a really nice guy to deal with, very down to earth, and I think after some initial skepticism among the fans about his appointment, a lot of people bought into the idea of having him in charge and wanted him to do well. It didn't. It just didn't. The results speak for themselves. The change was made. Some fans would argue it should have been made earlier, quite a bit earlier than it was, but it was. His style was very much playing out from the back and progressing through the thirds. So I think there is going to be a difference in style, but it's too early really to see any real noticeable signs of that tactically.
And how do you think that style will translate to this weekend's game? Obviously, with Sunderland flying high in the Championship, will Plymouth come and set up to defend and perhaps counter? Will their away sort of setup differ from the home setup?
Yeah, you can try and set up and defend, but that doesn't necessarily always guarantee success. Off the top of my head, Argyle have lost 5-0 at Cardiff, 6-1 at Norwich, 4-0 at Coventry. So heavy defeats are not unusual. They went to Leeds United in November and I think tried to literally park the bus and were 3-0 down at half-time. So it's a difficult one for them when you go to somewhere like Sunderland, who are doing so well. Yes, the sort of instinct is, look, we're going to try and defend as solidly as we possibly can, put everyone behind the ball, and and then try and work our way into the game from there. And that probably will be the tactic. But the difficulty with that is that you then invite so much pressure on yourself that against good teams with good strikers, there's every chance they're going to score a goal or two. So they are going to have to find a way where they can be strong defensively, but find an attacking threat. In the one reason for optimism for Argyle is that that FA Cup game that I mentioned, where they went to Brentford, who top scorers in the Premier League at home, fantastic home record in the Premier League at home. Argyle went there, beat them 1-0, and deservedly so. Thomas Frank admitted in the post-match press conference afterwards that Argyle deserved to win. So they did all the things that they're going to need to do against Sunderland at Brentford. So they have done it in the relative recent past. But when you've just come off a 5-0 home defeat to admittedly a good Burnley team, it's a big bounce back is required, isn't it? People always talk about bouncing back in football. This is going to be a big bounce back.
It's interesting, because of all the results that you've just listed, of all the Plymouth troubles this season, the change in manager, obviously the 5-0 loss last night. I was actually at the Stadium of Light for an under-21 game last night, and they had Sky Sports on in the background, and there were people around me saying it's 1-0 Burnley, 2-0 Burnley, 5-0 Burnley by half-time. And somebody turned around and said to me, this has got Plymouth Argyle 1-0 at Sunderland written all over it. And that's just the championship, isn't it? And I say that to try and sort of boost your spirits a bit, Chris, because you seem very low at the moment.
Well, like I say, it's only a few hours after I went to sleep after writing up all the copy from the game. And you're right, yes. I mean, Argyle went to Brentford with not many people expecting anything out of it. Yes, it's an FA Cup tie, and were Brentford fully focused on it? Possibly not. But strange things happen in the Championship, and yes, Argyle are going to need to defend for their lives, and if they get one or two chances, they have to take them. Strange things happen, so that's what they've got to believe. It'll be interesting to see, what approach Miran Muzlic takes to the game. This is going to be his first away game, which so the 3 games he's had so far have all been at home. So it's hard to give you an accurate gauge of how Argyle are going to play when I've not seen Argyle play any away game with him in charge. But one thing he did do at Cercle Bruges was he made them hard to beat. They were one of those teams that, the bigger clubs found annoying, frustrating. They were scrappy, hard to beat. That's clearly what he hopes to do at Argyle. Hopefully we can see some evidence of that on Saturday.
Yeah, I honestly, I see it as a potential banana skin for Sunderland. Obviously, there was the 3-2 at home park that I mentioned earlier. And I say this not because of anything Sunderland have really done this season, but Sunderland historically just generally will at some point do a Sunderland. So it would make sense that it would happen against, bottom side Plymouth Argyle after a 5-0 loss, given Sunderland unbeaten at home in the league this season. So I think we're all in that mentality where we're hoping that happens. We're hoping that doesn't happen, but there's an acceptance. Yes. There's an acceptance that strange things do happen in football. Just quickly before you go, Chris, I just wanted to get your thoughts on how ex-Sunderland duo Barley Mumba and Brendan Galloway are getting on. I understand there's an injury for Galloway. How serious is that, and how impressed have you been by Mumba since he came to the club?
Yeah, unfortunately for Brendan Galloway, it's a serious injury. He requires surgery and he's going to be out for the rest of the season, which is very sad for Brendan. He is a very capable defender who has had rotten luck with injuries over his career. I think it was the same at Sunderland, I believe. He was very, very young when he came to Sunderland. I think he only came for about 6 months in the Championship season. So Sunderland fans don't have too many fond memories of him because he came on loan
was it from Everton at the time or Chelsea? I can't remember.
Almost certainly Everton it would have been, yeah.
Everton, yeah, and yeah, he did terribly, but he was so young in such a poor team with so much going on that it's, when you make the list of worst ever Sunderland players, he's probably in it, but it's probably harsh on him to be fair looking back.
Yeah, well, like I say, he's been at Argyle for 3.5, 4 years. He's been a good player for them when he's been fit, but unfortunately, too often injuries have cropped up for him, and this is the latest one of them. Barley Mumba, has been a really good player for Argyle. He has got so much energy and enthusiasm. Like the rest of the team, he's not playing at his best at the moment, but overall, since he joined Argyle from Norwich for £1 million in the summer of 2023, he's been a good asset for them. It's tough times for all the team at the moment, but he's the sort of character that you need. Somebody who can put some smiles on faces and things like that. So I would fully expect him to start against Sunderland. Not entirely sure where, depending on how Argyle line up. He's been playing on right back, left back, right wing back, left wing back. So he could pop up anywhere on the pitch. But yeah, I'm sure he will be out there on Saturday and wanting to put in a really good performance, given his ties to Sunderland and obviously coming from the northeast.
No, absolutely. Well, Chris, I appreciate your time. I hope Plymouth's form picks up after Saturday, and I hope your job becomes a little bit easier at some point, because it is a real grind when it's like this. I sympathise.
No, I shouldn't complain, because we're in the fortunate position where we get paid to go to watch football, and yes, it's not always a bundle of laughs. The fans are the ones that dig deep in their pockets, aren't they, and go to these games, and there will be, I don't know how many, but a good number of Argyle fans at the stadium. Like they've not won an away championship game all season. It's over 400 miles, 800 mile round trip. Goodness knows what time they'll be leaving on the coaches on Saturday morning, but they'll be there. They'll be supporting the team, and so I hope for their sakes, as much as anything, that they get some reward for their dedication to the football club.
No, indeed, and fair play to those Plymouth fans travelling. Thank you for joining us, Chris. You can find Chris.
My pleasure, James. Thanks for the invite.
No problem. You can find Chris's work over at Plymouth Live if you want to read about Morgan Whittaker, the Burnley game, and anything leading up to Sunderland. And as always, you can find all of our work ahead of the Plymouth game over at the Sunderland Echo website, online and in print. Thanks once again to Chris, and we'll